Welcome back. A judge has granted a class action order in connection with the Listeriosis issue. This means 14 people will represent the full group of over 1,000 complainants. Health Minister Aaron Motsoaledi confirmed the outbreak, claimed more than 180 lives. In September, government declared processed meat products such as bologna, Russians and Viennas were safe to eat. Listeriosis was the first noted in October last year. The source of the outbreak was traced to a Tiger Brands plant. All right, for more on that story now, we're joined by Thamsanqa Malusi from Richard Spoor Inc. Attorneys. Thanks very much for coming into studio.
Thank you for having me.
We don't often see class action suits in South Africa. Off air, you were telling us this is the second class action order that's been granted. Just take us through why it's actually such a good way of addressing a case like this.
Yeah. Class actions, by definition, seek to represent a group of people that have been affected by the same objective harm, right? So we take everyone, for instance, in the Listeriosis class action, the 1,060 people would be all fall under one litigation. Whereas if we were not bringing it as a class action, we would have 1,060 single suits against Tiger Brands. Now we know a lot of our people cannot afford legal fees, because litigation can be quite expensive. So it makes a lot of sense, specifically in instances where you have 1,060 people where they've suffered the same objective harm, and the legal principles that would have to be argued in all cases are the same, to simply just bring those people under one action and litigate that against the defendant. So that's what international class actions are.
Why is it that class action suits are not sort of the order of the day when it comes to addressing an issue like this? In the States, we see reports of class action orders being granted all the time.
Yeah. It's been a slow progress of our law, specifically with regards to class actions. The class actions were first recognized when the new constitution was enacted, but before, common law in South Africa did not recognize class actions. In 2012, the Supreme Court of Appeals released a judgment specifically recognizing class actions and setting out the principles that have to be looked at when you bring a class action. In 2013, the Constitutional Court endorsed that judgment, and in 2016 we brought a class action lawsuit against the gold mining industry for gold miners that were affected by silicosis. Yeah. And for the first time, the courts did certify a class action in South Africa. And so we have been seeing some progress, but it's been steady and it's been very slow. But I think class action can be incredibly beneficial in South Africa to assist people that could otherwise not afford to litigate against corporations like Tiger Brands.
Yeah, absolutely. So for Tiger Brands' part, it says that there's no confirmed liability on its part in this Listeriosis case. But for the class action order to have been granted, would that not be a prerequisite?
It's not. So with a class action, it's a two-step process, right? Because in normal court proceedings, all you do is you simply go to court and argue the case on its merits, and then the judge makes a decision. With class actions, because you're seeking to represent each and every person that has been affected by whatever the case is, even people that did not formally instruct you, the court acts as an upper guardian of those people. So we actually have to first approach the court and argue to the court that this is a suitable case for a class action, and that the lawyers that are seeking to bring the class action are suitable to actually bring the class action. And it's only at that stage, once the court approves the certification, which is where we are with the Listeriosis outbreak, then we can argue the case on its merits.
So it's just the class action order being granted is a legal issue that's been addressed. It doesn't speak to any evidence.
Certainly, but with that said, though, we had to show that there's a triable case against Tiger Brands before we can get the order certified, because it wouldn't make sense for the courts to grant a certification if there's no if we haven't made that flaw, if we haven't shown the court that there is some degree of success, should we argue the case on its merits. So we did argue that that there is a case to be made here. Tiger Brands simply did not oppose that on that basis, but that doesn't mean that when it comes to us actually arguing liability, they're not going to oppose themselves being liable.
Yeah. So what happens from here on? You're talking about 1,060 claimants here. They'll be represented by these 14 people. But what happens in terms of the kind of evidence that you need to gather now? Do you go out and speak to each of these 1,060 people? So
firstly, what we have to do, in fact, we have to show the court now, after certification, that we can actually try to get to each and every single person that has been affected. So the 1,060 people, we had to show the court in the certification process that we have to get to those people. Now, we have solicited the assistance of the Department of Health because they do have a database with all these people. So they're going to be assisting us in getting those people. So from this point onwards, that's a process for bringing people into the litigation. But when it comes to the actual litigation itself, now we have to file what is called our summons, where we're actually making a case as to the liability of Tiger Brands. We're planning to file that to the courts in early January, and then Tiger Brands will obviously plea if they so wish, I think. And then once they've done that, and then when there's a clause of pleading, then we're going to enter what's called a discovery process, where we're going to be asking for a host of documentation specifically around what audits were made in the plant that the outbreak emanated from. This is all in trying to show that Tiger Brands was in fact liable. And once the court finds them liable, and then we can talk about damages for the victims. But importantly, though, that this does not stop a parallel process of settlement happening at the same time.
Right, so it could be, well before you actually get to the process that you're talking about, Tiger Brands might decide to settle the case out of court.
Exactly, and we hope that they do, because, I mean, litigation is expensive, and people continuously are suffering and are still feeling the effects of the outbreak. Now, we would not want a protracted process. We would want this thing to be settled as quickly as possible. So if Tiger Brands is amenable, we are willing to settle the case, obviously in the best interest of the class. And before we got certified, we could not talk about settlement because the court did not, in fact, recognize us as the legal representatives for the victims. It's only now that we have officially been recognized, then we can speak on behalf of 1,060 people.
Yeah. I mean, outside of this case being settled outside of the court process, what kinds of timeframes would you be looking at with a case like this?
Luckily, the court, this case is case managed. What this means is that there's a specific judge allocated to make sure that the case moves smoothly and as progressively and as quickly as possible. With the pleadings and the discovery process, and with case management, we are hoping that by late next year, that process would be complete, and then we would get a date after that for the actual hearing. So in all likelihood, we're looking at 2020, early 2020 for the case to be concluded. Obviously, this, I'm talking about the litigation process and not the settlement itself.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, still a long road ahead, I should think. Thanks very much for your time and coming into studio. Thamsanqa Malusi is from Richard Spoor Attorneys, and that's as a judge has just granted a class action order in connection with the Listeriosis case.